Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable. Forbes India presents the next wave of cloud innovation in association with Google Cloud.
Retail is all about the details, from supply chains to the shopping channel. Everything now needs to be approached from the lens of timely, targeted, and tailored experiences for customers, especially as digital first shopping journeys are blurring the lines between the physical and digital brand experience. Shoppers want to know what's available before they visit your stores, and they expect a variety of fulfillment options. Now, for context, the nearly $900 billion worth Indian retail sector is emerging from one of its most trying periods amid lockdowns caused by the pandemic, with estimates of around $30 billion in lost revenue. Today, on our special series titled Forbes India and Google Cloud present the next wave of cloud innovation, we will explore how a digital foundation powered by the cloud is helping retailers weather the storm and enabling new ways to attract and retain customers. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and I'll be speaking with leading voices from this sector around this topic from the perspective of platform, data and personalization, supply chain, and modern store transformation. So, without further delay, let me introduce our panel to you, starting with Sameer Dhingra, Director for the Retail and Consumer Verticals in the JPAC region at Google Cloud, Manish Gupta, Managing Director and India Business Head for Consumer Centric Industries at Accenture, Ramakant Sharma, co-founder of home interior and renovation platform LiveSpace, Sanjeev Banwal, who's the co-founder and CTO of social e-commerce platform Meesho, Raghu Krishnananda, CTO at fashion e-commerce platform Myntra, and Manish Bhatia, President for Technology, Analytics and Capabilities at FinTech platform Lending Card. Gentlemen, great to have all of you on board. Let's get an idea first on how to prepare a platform that enables you to withstand disruption, and then we could focus on specific case studies of success. So let's understand the value chain first, the retail value chain that consists of 8 parts and ranges from, say, top of funnel activities like customer acquisition and retention to back office activities like, say, real estate and corporate functions. Now, estimates show that the retail sector alone has invested in 3 years worth of digital transformation within a span of 6 months, with acceleration of investments in key digital themes that includes autonomous checkout, warehousing optimization, AI enabled last mile logistics, etc. So how was your technology base structured before the pandemic to address work on the front and back end, and how did it position you to handle this disruption? That's what we'll explore first, starting with Ramakant, and then we'll get in Sanjeev and Raghu for their views. Ramakant.
Thanks, Gautam. It's an interesting uh, thought here. I think I would really wants to answer this thing in a way. This has 3 components. Something on the infrastructure side, which essentially means really the 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 channels for digital transformation were existent more or less, in my opinion. Though what has happened faster is the adoption of those channels. Because of this pandemic, most of us has been forced to really use those things which were available. It's really not the new innovations in terms of technology. It's the use of the technology has really gone, maybe you say 3x, or in my opinion maybe it's a 10x. So what we are observing is the adoption which could have taken maybe 5 years to adopt to the consumers. And when I say adoption, it has 3 layers of adoption. One is information, basically the back office you mentioned, the top of the funnel, to the delivery boys, to the really the consumers. Each of them have a information required, minimum information required to transact on internet or digitally. Second is a visualization. Certain aspect of retails are about visualizing things, not really getting the appropriate information. That information is a necessary condition. So visualization has been solved in the digital era by taking pictures, then it moved to videos, 3Ds, and with more and more internet bandwidth available at a cheaper cost, I think the visualization is no longer a problem. People do not really have dependency on offline retail, or it's not a blocker for visualization. The third, which is I think the important aspect, is still is a trust element on the retail. The consumers have to really trust the visualization and information. Apart from visualization and information, trust the brand and the goods and services they are buying, which sometimes needs a, a some degree of customer experience connect, or a touch point on the call center, or an experience center in case of live space. But I think the combination of these three really led this massive investment, because the amount of consumption, I think, rather it has increased in various shape and form, and we need to handle that kind of a consumption basis on these pillars of information technology, information visualization, and trust. And trust also has certain elements of technology by putting various you know the connecting dots in an omni-channel fashion. So I think all of this combinedly, definitely, I tend to think that the adoption of these things, and by the way, all three were there in the process with most of the businesses, but the
Hmm.
importance of these and adoption of these three things has really increased in last 1.5 years.
All right. Information, visualization, and trust. That's the thinking at LiveSpace to position itself to handle this disruption. Let's hear the Meesho story. Sanjeev, what's your approach, and what's the base of infrastructure which you had, and how did you position you to handle this disruption?
Yeah, I think at Meesho, we're one of the fortunate companies to be at the right place and the right time to see this massive change in e-commerce adoption, specifically in below tier one cities in India, right? In your small towns, small cities. We saw a massive adoption of e-commerce, people coming online, buying for the first time through an e-commerce platform, to the extent that over the last 1 year, we grew 5x in terms of order volume. Now, being a tech first company, from the beginning itself, we had invested in the right areas, which is building for scale, right? So, for example, from the beginning itself, we had tremendous focus on cloud first approach, trying to make sure the architecture itself is able to handle the newer scale. But one thing which has definitely changed was with this new customers coming online for the first time, we had to resort to going heavy on the personalization side because they're coming online for the first time. They're not that tech savvy. I think optimizing the shopping experience for them was a game changer, in my opinion. So invested heavily on the personalization, making sure new users are able to kind of get the right products upfront when they open the app. The UX is simple enough or comprehensible for them to kind of make those purchase decisions, develop that trust by exposing the right amount of ratings and review, etc. Have definitely helped a lot in unlocking growth in Meesho.
All right, you already had a cloud first approach which helped you build scale. You added the hyper personalization element to be more relevant to your customers, and that's what we're talking about, the context of outcomes. Fair point, Sanjeev. Let me come to Raghu. In a sense, a veteran in the space. When we look at Myntra, Raghu, what was the thinking underpinning in terms of the technology infrastructure, and how did it position Myntra to handle the disruption? Because the disruption, while it happened in the past 2 years, now the next point is that there's going to be a huge amount of demand coming in as well.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on the panel, Gautam. Happy to be here. Yeah, so one of the hallmarks, as Sanjeev also called out in this new normal, has been like a shift from a lot of the, especially the tier 2, tier 3 cities, users from there moving online, right? So this is a new experience for them. And we've had to kind of take a step back and rethink and focus on a few areas as we move on. So in fact, some of these we already had in our roadmaps, and some we had to accelerate to meet this new requirement. So Myntra has always been a tech-focused company, so we continue to invest heavily across our back-end, partner-facing, and customer-facing systems. Just to call out a few examples, right, from our back-end systems, so which includes functions like planning, selection, buying, warehousing, delivery, customer care, and so on. So I'll give you a few examples, right? So the first thing is to identify fashion trends. So this is very important to see what is trending, so that we feed that information to our planning and buying teams. So this is something that we use data science heavily across the board, and then we actually identify these trends at the attribute level, right? So we also use data science models to predict demand, at the regional level. We have warehouses distributed across the country, so we want to bring supply close to the demand. So this enhances speed of delivery to the customer, right? Again, in the backend systems, we have a lot of automation, automated sorting machines. We use RFID technology to accurately track sort packages and ship packages. So all of this required some foundational work and technology building. Now, coming to the customer facing side of things, personalization is absolutely a key area for us as well. So we have over 9 lakh styles on Myntra. So as you can imagine, so a customer can easily get quite distracted, trying to search or look for the things that he or she would like. So we also are heavily investing in customer personalization at the individual level, right? The other key thing that we saw is content, right, becoming extremely important in this new normal. So we'd already seen some of these trends in other countries, especially countries like China. So this is something that we had already thought about, but we had to accelerate this, right? So we introduced a feature called Myntra Studio, where more than 1,000 of the top influencers in the country come and post, content which can be used by our customers for fashion inspiration, right? So this is something again that is a little bit taking inspiration from the offline market, where a salesperson is like showing what the person might like and trying to influence them. So this is something in that direction, right? Another cool feature that we introduced, again, we're taking cue from the offline space, is the mall, right? So we created a virtual mall where brands can showcase their brand stores with their own unique look and feel. So people who are very clear on a particular brand that they need to, that they're interested in, can go directly to the brand store and purchase as if they're going to a real mall, right? Mm-hmm. Another area what we've invested in from a technology point of view is AR, VR technology, right? So this is again looking at, one of the things that we do is when we go offline is go try things on, right? How do you replicate such an experience online? This is where we bring in this virtual try-on feature using AR, VR to see how people can, virtually try on apparel or lipstick. So these are some of the things that we had to kind of double down and invest in.
Lots of exciting developments, Raghavan. It's interesting to see how the face of retail itself is changing with all these players, which includes, as we mentioned, Livspace, Meesho, and Myntra, doing a lot of interesting things. But let's also see how the SMEs operating in this sector have changed. And I'll bring in Manish for that. Manish, how do you think SMEs operating in this sector that Lending Card provides loans to have oriented the way they do business, considering all the larger players have rapidly scaled up their digital capabilities? And you've just seen a sliver of that from the 3 previous speakers. So how have the customers that you cater to how have they oriented themselves?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on this panel, and really interesting discussion, right? So, MSMEs, if I have to sort of think about that, right? If you look at a social graph, and a lot of people over here would recognize that, is you have a customer, you have a person, and they have a graph of people they are connected, either friends or colleagues, things like that. From an MSME or even a commercial standpoint, there's a very similar graph called a commercial graph. And what really happens in a commercial graph is where it basically defines, a large organization or a producer or a factory, how they're connected with various different MSMEs or SMEs to actually either, they provide services, they provide goods from a vendor standpoint, from a supplier standpoint. So, it's a very interconnected world, very similar to, what we see, in the online social side of things. Now, what is very difficult is digitization in a siloed environment. So I wouldn't say, a specific industry is actually getting digitized. I wouldn't say a specific company is getting digitized, because what happens in this ecosystem is there's a constant push and pull happening that everyone around in that ecosystem actually gets digitized. So just answering your question, Gautam, is if I look at two specific aspects. One is the business interactions. So large players, their interaction with MSMEs, they have digitized. What's it's actually happening is, they are pushing MSMEs to get digitized when it comes to payments, when it comes to billing, when it comes to invoicing. Now, the other aspect is direct consumer interaction, right? MSMEs are the front face of most of the retail stores out there, and about 35% of India's GDP comes from MSMEs. Now, post COVID, there was huge digitization when it comes to customer experiences when they're interacting with these shops, right? Where payments have to be online. They don't want to use hard cash, things like that. Now, the side effect of that, Gautam, has that now, because of this digitization, there's lots and lots of data which MSMEs are now sitting on, either by UPI transactions or bank transactions or invoice transactions, that has invariably improved their new to credit to actually understanding what their real credit history and algorithms can be built on top so that they can get working capital loan to do their business. So, overall, I would say it has had a very positive impact on SMEs, where because of this ecosystem push, obviously they had to comply. But one interesting thing is, when they change very rapidly. So they don't have this huge organizational structure to worry about, right? If it makes business sense, if customers are happy, they will adopt to it. So essentially, we are seeing massive adoption there.
All right, that's your ringside view as to how the Davids are matching up to the Goliaths. And lots of interesting talking points are coming in from a data perspective and also from a personalization and from a platform perspective. So let's bring in the enablers right now. Samir, you've heard all the case studies of how retailers have managed to not just survive but thrive by being positioned in the right way from their digital credentials. So in your perspective, how can Google help deliver a more unified and compelling shopping experience for customers here on?
But I was just listening to all the nuggets of information which my fellow panelists were providing, foundational stuff, personalization, simple user experience, and so on and so forth. I think all of them are absolutely perfect. And I think each of them, my panelists are leaders in their respective field. What we have seen is that, frankly, one has to really leverage technology across the value chain or across the shopper purchase journey, not just a single use case or two use cases, to really impact this whole omni-channel seamless experience that we're talking about. So from a Google Cloud's perspective, we try and offer something or the other across, whether you're talking about the shopper purchase journey or you're talking about the value chain across merchandising, warehousing, pricing, e-commerce platforms, and so on and so forth. Primarily, we are looking to work with retailers across four big areas. First one, if you have not yet modernized your e-commerce application, so we can help retailers basically modernize that. But if you have the digital platforms already set up, then we work with our retailers to set up those experiences that you're talking about. So product discovery, recommendations, personalization, so on and so forth. I think the second big area where we are helping our customers is in terms of building the data platforms. And I think, a lot of the stuff that my fellow panelists talked about in terms of personalization or recommendations cannot be done unless you have the strong data foundations that we're talking about. And once you have that, then how do you really leverage the AI ML models or prepackaged solutions or algorithms to really drive those use cases forward? Third big area where we're seeing a lot of activity is also store modernization. And I think many, of panelists here basically are more focused on the digital side. But I think primarily, if you look at the work which is happening on the store modernization side, there's a ton of activity which is happening with respect to in-store execution, assisted shopping experiences, and so on and so forth. I think the last but not the least, given the nature of retail, improving operational efficiencies become extremely important. So we also work with our customers to see how can they really reduce cost, reduce risk, and ensure that they're more operationally efficient. They're able to reach their customers, or the customers are able to reach them more effectively, either through messages or contact centers or rapid response agents and so on and so forth. So I think we are looking at multiple areas in the way we can engage with retailers and really help them accelerate in this new normal.
All right, Samir, and we'll expand on those enablement options that Google affords during the discussion, also in the context of what's going on and what could be. Manish, meanwhile, let me bring you in. How does Accenture view the evolution of the customer experience as the new normal of retail shifts from the rise of the web to mobile and omni-channel to AI-powered experiences and processes? Are there case studies of creating not just a unique customer experience, but an engaging and long-term customer experience that you could share from the work that Accenture does with clients?
Right. Thank you. And very privileged to be a part of the conversation with all the transformation innovations our panelists are driving. See, essentially, there's a lot of discussion around personalization, and I think that's the new mantra. What is essentially, the way we are looking at it, we all know consumer demands are changing, and the consumer themselves are changing, and this evolution is very dynamic. They also don't know what is happening. So what we are essentially, and we need to know consumer more as consumers and more people, and not as channels, but what experience we can give. So what we are suggesting our clients in terms of to have a more holistic experience, and we call it as business of experience, right? And not necessarily just focused on consumer experience, which has been talked about. To give an analogy, right, in terms of most of the companies, Netflix essentially as an organization wants to own the experience at the home. The intent was not just to make sure that they provide movie streaming online better, but own the experience. And so the business of experience, what do we mean? That it's something which is owned and driven by the entire organization. And there are 4 aspects which we believe it can be done. First, obsess about customer needs and use that at their compass. And if we see example of Meesho, like Livspace, they were unmet consumer needs, right? And which these companies targeted and win in that space. Make experience and innovation as everyday habit. And we all browse through Myntra, and every day, or there are new features which has come in, which generally excites you, and you hook onto that, and some of the very marquee features. Expand the experience remit across the organization. So it's no longer a one CX role, right? It essentially expands to all the different functions. And we all go to Amazon and buy there because it's a holistic experience. We know whatever we buy, whatever, even we go and raise a query, it will be addressed. If we return, it will be addressed. So it's a holistic experience which has been coming up. And all that is underpinned with a sync between tech, data, and human agendas. So if all those things work seamlessly, I think the organizations will succeed. And we are seeing, obviously we have all the people from esteemed organizations which have grown in a substantial, because they are owning the experience. From our side, we are working with multiple companies in shaping their thinking, because there's also an element in terms of the companies which are young companies which grown like this, but then they are mature companies which are trying to become young in this direction. So one of the companies we have been working is Shoppers Stop, where we accelerate digital commerce transformation across multiple channels. We are using exactly the concept of business of experience in driving growth there, digital commerce. And also, I would emphasize in terms of giving them profitable, sustained growth, because that is also important, at least for the mature companies to sustain their growth over a long-term basis.
Absolutely. We've heard the overview of the business of experience from Manish, but the key point there is sustainable and profitable growth. while imbibing holistic customer experience across the organization's DNA in service of that. Meanwhile, let's get down to the brass tacks now and see some specific success stories within these organizations and see how they managed to do it. Sanjeev, we'll come to you first. Meesho solves for its customer experience by empowering its fulfillment and experience team to take a tech first approach when it comes to solving for user experience. Now, since tech is the backbone of everything that you do at FNE, tell us about some examples where it has worked to improve customer satisfaction.
Yeah, it's an interesting domain, I would say. Specifically, fulfillment is probably one of the most complex domains out there. The reason being that thousands of factors determine how are you going to fulfill an item from a source to a destination. Seeing all the pin codes that we have, I think for fulfillment we rely on our third-party logistics partners mostly to the extent that we right now have consume about more than 60% of the entire third-party volume which exists in the country. Now, when you operate at this scale, I think having tighter integration with their systems to understand how each and every lane is performing, which is, by the way, very dynamic. It is influenced by not just opening new pin codes by the different delivery partners, but also different events. Let's say a state going on a strike or different natural calamities affecting a particular lane. So over time, we have tried to kind of model each and every factor into our system to predict delivery dates, right? And that is important for our customers because I think setting the right expectation in the beginning of how long is this going to take, because sometimes they're going to buy it for a festival. We also have entrepreneurs on Meesho, so they are going to set those expectations with their end customers, and their, I think, fulfillment experience becomes even more important. So I think there what we have done is with data science, we are now able to kind of very accurately predict what are the delivery dates going to be for each and every product. Secondly, I think because the supply chain is very dynamic, how do you identify different choke points in this entire lane and how do you course correct? So basically having that tighter feedback loop of detecting problems at different choke points and diverting shipments across becomes another interesting problem to solve. I think third, which is in the context of India mostly, which is when users place an order, they would maybe at times not provide the complete address. So they would write maybe this mango tree, or maybe beside this mango tree, or beside this pawn shop, right? Now, those are interesting addresses. How do you kind of make sure they get delivered, or at least you have the right feedback loop there back to the customer on providing the right address? If you don't do that, you end up paying twice the shipment charge. So there we have innovated a lot in terms of using data science to figure out good and bad addresses, and also course auto correcting some of the addresses with the right processes in place.
All right, that's the Meesho experience, and I'll take one point that you mentioned, which is the supply chain choke points, which is a problem for any organization. And herein, I'll bring in Ramakant to understand how those issues can be resolved. Ramakant, traditionally, a home interiors consumer had to go through, say, several fragmented steps while designing a home. Matching products and service offerings with the design requirement was a challenge. Now, supply chain had to be reinvented with every order undertaken, making it difficult for, say, design studios and independent contractors to offer price transparency and predictability. Now, despite large spends, consumers did not get, say, assurance on quality of work. So I want to understand from you, how did LiveSpace use technology to resolve these issues by creating the industry's first unique three-sided marketplace that brought together consumers, designers, and supply chain vendors on one platform?
So thanks, Gautam. I think I'll start with this thing, what it really a three-sided marketplace or a platform means. So designer is a sort of entrepreneur in the system where the designer has got a problem statement to really aesthetically, functionally design a within the budget, a solution for the customer. So imagine a situation or the extent of the discussion we had with the panelist in the context of personalization in this case. This is almost $15,000 on an average purchase, starting from $1,000 to maybe a $50,000 kind of a purchase ticket. And home is very personalized and very emotional and high on ticket. Consumers really do not want to go wrong with that. So we use lots of rule engines, data science models, where we can almost 80% design outputs basis on the data points entered by the consumers are automated. For instance, there are rules which says if you selected a blue color couch, there are only X color of curtains can be put in. But definitely a designer or consumer can override the machine driven design choices. So given this is a large ticket, very personalized solution, and probably one of the highest technology used in any shape and form of retail for the personalization and data sides. Once that part is done, we call this is design to manufacturing to installation. Some of the discussion we had on supply chain, but this supply chain, underlying supply chain is a 4 million SKUs. Probably, I'm not sure, but probably it's the world's largest home products catalog at the back end. And this catalog, almost 60 to 65% of this catalog is being processed JIT, which means it's a manufactured on demand. So this doesn't have not only the variability of natural calamities and roadblocks and zip codes, this has one more components on top of the typical e-commerce or a retail is JIT manufacturing, which further has dependency on the fluctuations on raw material. For instance, the steel prices last 6 months world over has gone changed and the supply has gone constant. Some of the international raw material supply chain from China, Vietnam has gone to a different level of disruption. So all of that has to handle for an order at JIT. So we call our system design to manufacturing to installation. So the designer who is an entrepreneur actually designs a personalized low cost solution. This includes the kind of a visualization you can think of is one of the massive use of AR VR, and sort of we have experience centers, close to 40 experience centers now. We'll be expanding these. So what experience centers are done, they're not really the showrooms where you can buy things. What they do is you can really visualize better. These are smart places where you can really touch, feel virtually lots of smartness built on the stores through. You can really visualize how is your home going to be, and hence the customers can make a decision of buying such a large ticket on internet. Once these two things happens, customer is satisfied with the design solution, visualization, tactile is done, and choice of the look and feel are personalized to his or her choices. The manufacturing is very important aspect of that's why we call it a three-sided marketplace. And I talked about in previous discussion, the information is an important element. So while you're discussing a blue couch, 2 days later a customer might change it to red, but this red needs to really update the price point and really update the factories who are going to manufacture the red couch. And below downstream, the fabric supplier has to supply a new red now, and that red has to be exactly that red which consumer thinks. There are multiple shades of red, so that part addressed on the visualization aspect of it. Once the manufacturing is done and the sort of things are really shipped from manufacturers, either the last part of this visualize the putting this visualization into the real home, that we call it as a D2M2I, means installation is the last mile. So let's say a typical living room or a kitchen is nothing but more than 120 to 200 SKUs. In our case, a handle is a SKU, a tray is a SKU, an appliance is a SKU, a box is an SKU. Putting those SKUs on the site in a logical fashion, like there is a mathematics to this. It's a and sometimes it's an NP-hard problem to fix those boxes onto a sort of a rectangle or a square place. But these are automated installation diagrams generated, which helps the last mile person to really put a place A, component C after A. So these are logical diagrams which really gives an experience where today we are almost a 4 sigma on all of this D2M2I process. So to cater all of this to the consumers, to the designers, to the manufacturers flawlessly. I think technology is the only way, and this involves lots of software engineering as well as smart devices, plus a multi channel coordination. In that's again sort of a various interfaces, but still there is a huge amount of omni-channel coordination in the process.
Absolutely. So those are all the elements at work to bring to life this three-sided marketplace at LiveSpace. An excellent overview that you have given, Ramakant. And what you mentioned, information, visualization, and trust. I'll take the last point, trust, especially in the context of the supply chain, and bring in the idea of last mile deliveries, which could be seen as a weak point. And Raghu, I'll bring you into this. Myntra has been betting big on Kirana stores for last mile deliveries, and it has expanded its network to, I believe, around 25,000 stores. So how has that transformed the shopping experience for customers, especially during the festival seasons where demand see a spurt?
Yeah, so Myntra uses combination of this last mile delivery network. So we have our own logistics, we have third-party logistics, and what we call as Mensa, which is our Kirana partner network that you talked about. So in fact, this has been very, very successful, and I think Myntra has been one of the pioneers to use this approach. Since the last festive season till now, so we've increased this number of stores by 30% to about 25,000, as you mentioned. And in fact, about 70% of the deliveries during this festive season is expected to happen through this network, right? So it's been very successful. So this required obviously technology plus also policies to come together to make this successful and deliver value to the customer. So first of all, for these Kirana, store owners, this is, generates additional income. And in fact, there's something that they actually very, eagerly look forward to, these big events during which they actually augment their income like by more than 200%, right? By making this additional money. In fact, that we provide additional incentives and also other help, such as, for example, we provide them COVID insurance during this, which and especially during the first wave and second waves was very important. So this is basically very attractive and a big win for them. Now coming to Myntra, so this gives us this capability to expand this delivery network in a fairly elastic way, where we have signed up these Kirana stores and pre-authenticated them, so that when there is demand, especially during these seasonal times, we're able to expand seamlessly and take care of deliveries. And all this is geared towards providing a great customer experience. Right? What this really means is increased speed of delivery and speed of pickups, right, for returns. So that's how this really helps our customers.
All right, let me bring in Samir. Samir, we've had a great talking point coming out of, say, the FNE credentials of Meesho, and how the three-sided marketplace comes to life for LiveSpace. And of course, in terms of Myntra, the last mile delivery taken care of by their Mensa program. In the context of all that you've heard, how can Google help retailers deliver better personalized customer experiences, understand customer behavior, and more importantly, enable data-driven decision-making to solve all these pain points which come up during the course of business?
I think, to drive a good personalization engine, it is imperative to have a common retail data model to really get a single view of the customer. And only if you can get a single view of the customer and have the ability to do so, you are then able to, predict the customer behavior, anticipate the demands, and really optimize the inventories across your value chain. I think that's the single most fundamental, initiative that an organization can drive to have a better personalization engine. But that is not enough. I remember, I think Ramakant was talking about information and visualization initially. I think ability to extract information and visualize it at scale without using very complex analytical efforts is then the key. Because once you have the foundation built in, then how do you really engage various stakeholders across your organization And only when you're able to do that, you are then able to build a strong prediction engine and a system of insight for your organization.
All right. So let me bring in Ramakant to respond. And also in the context of the fact that when it comes to information and visualization, low code, no code is also an approach which many big retailers around the world are adopting. So Ramakant, as in that context, to boost agility and efficiency, if low code, no code is going to be the way to go for retailers to develop, deploy, and manage custom retail execution applications by reducing, say, time to market and dependency on highly skilled developers. Do you think this is the approach that is going to be the new normal for the retail sector, including, say, SMEs considering the need to scale up quickly as demand, which was pent up due to the pandemic, comes rushing back?
So, Gautam, I think I'll slightly answer the question maybe after a minute, but let me put it this way. I think the most important aspect of the retail is data. If your data lakes are available, data is digitized and it is queryable, readable, and the appropriate users are able to visualize it by using any tool. So with that context, I think the efficiency of retail, whether it's a supply chain efficiencies, inventory churn efficiencies, working capital efficiencies, and all of these efficiencies are not really this definitely links to your P&L, but they are definitely also linked with the consumer experience and your partner experience. Retail is in general is an ecosystem play. There's no retailer in the world who acts in isolation. So given it is fundamentally a data play, now the data has goods and services, those needs to be visualized at appropriate I say point of sale or point of interaction with relevant users. But while this was happening, most of the data lakes and data systems are available to the large retailers or the modern retailers or organized companies, tech companies. But there's a larger segment who I think the coming to the no code thing, no code can be a very good tool to really quickly enable some of the processes, operations, digitize those. Like let's say there is a small cut and printing factory. They can really code their workflows on a no code process very quickly, but they have to really have the data sets on the backend predefined to work, the no code to work for flawlessly. So I think the question is for SMBs. For instance, Shopify changed the word. It was a different word from Amazon, but can really we can create something on an app store. Shopify is mostly a web store, and then there are applications needed to process those orders. How do you handle packaging, sorting, picking, all of these things? So I think no code is definitely will be in use. It will become more and more useful when the fundamental data pipelines in place for the companies. And the catch-22 situation here is the larger companies have better data streams available, but they don't need no code system, because generally they are backed by good quality engineering teams and they have larger R&D budgets. It's the other way around. The companies who where the no code can be much more useful, they are now, I think, rapidly started collecting the data points on each touch point. But my sense is that might take some more time before the no code becomes a complete go-to things.
All right. But some of the larger FMCG players, like say Mondelez, have also gone towards this low code, no code approach. But coming back to the point on the relevance for SMBs,
I think is definitely super useful in the cases where there's a large FMCG, large companies where data is in place, and there are multiple things where business teams want a quick answers. They do not really have to go through a large software development cycles where they need to create sort of a utility tools, workflow tools for better optimization of their day-to-day life. I think that adoption is going to be massive.
All right. Thanks for clarifying that, Ramakant. Meanwhile, for the perspective of SMBs using a low code, no code approach, let me get the lending card perspective. And Manish, what's your thoughts on this? Is that going to be the new normal?
Well, see, I think it's never a one size fits all sort of, and it's very like Mr. Ramakant actually said it very aptly. It depends on the use cases, whether you want to use data for some good insights, or are you creating an application to collect data, or is it a user experience where every single click, every single pixel is very important for your user experience. So, low code, no code, super useful when you have to create boilerplate coding, UX, security, logging, tracing, all those things just come out of the box, right? And it's beautiful if you want to do A/B testing, figure out whether this is going to work in the market or not, without actually putting a lot of effort for very quick customer feedback. Also for internal tools, it could be workflows, or it could be tools where you're gathering data from a specific customer or an application. Super useful. But I still feel that for areas where companies would want to really control the user experience, the low code no code has not gotten to that point. So I feel it's super useful, and SMBs specifically, if they are building applications, outsourcing it, I think it's a very, very easy and low cost way of onboarding onto simpler applications. I think more complex ones, there's still a bit time to get there.
All right, let's expand the conversation around the supply chain. We spoke about the bottlenecks. Now, in the context of supply chain, control towers are emerging as an option. And let me get in Sanjeev and Raghu for their points of view on the fact that many retailers think control towers are the answer to address a multitude of supply chain blind spots, including unexpected supply shortages, network bottlenecks, response to disruptions, and big changes in what consumers are purchasing and where they are purchasing. Now, control towers are also supporting retailers in sensing demand fluctuations as well as supply disruptions in real time, translating that into, say, various risks: the risk of poor customer service, or the risk of lower revenues, or the risk of lower margins due to expensive cost correction. So, what are your deployments in terms of rethinking the supply chain to be more responsive and mitigate risk? We'll hear from Sanjeev first, and then Raghu.
So I think for us, we have realized that in supply chain, first and foremost, avoiding single point of failures is extremely important. So if you're trying to service customers in multiple places, just not relying on only single lane connectivity is one of the important things to look out for. Second, for us, where we are a marketplace between suppliers, which are mostly smaller suppliers, they're coming online for the first time. I think giving them right visibility into what sells well on a platform like us. How do you price your products right? How do you deal with surge in order volumes? How do you plan for capacity at an early stage? I think giving that prediction of, effectively it comes down to giving that prediction of how many items are going to be sold from this platform at a given point in time, helps them in kind of planning in advance for all the disruptions that are that could happen on because of multiple reasons, right? And I think second, which is again important, is trying to kind of help them not just in getting the items listed on the platform, but also the way they. So a lot of our suppliers are manufacturers. So how do you help them in getting the right products manufactured? How do you help them in kind of going up the supply chain to help them source different raw materials, helping them in predicting that, connecting them with the right partners has also helped us in kind of helping suppliers scale as well as manufacture the right products.
All right, Raghu, your thoughts on control towers being the answer to making the supply chain more responsive? What are your deployments?
Yeah, control towers are definitely a very important part of the supply chain at Myntra. So they help monitor like movement of goods through the multiple nodes to ensure there's no choking at any point, or there is no leakage, right, due to various reasons. And this is both for like the forward flow, then the reverse flow of the merchandise, for returns and so on, right? So this basically overall improves the efficiency and resource optimization. So it's we continuously monitor, right? So these blind spots in the supply chain, and look at it, real-time data, data analytics, reporting. Do all of this to that our operations team has access to all of this information to react and with agility, right? So we saw many such, I mean, it's an ongoing thing, so it happens every day, but it was even more so acute during the lockdown periods when things were serviceable for certain pin codes, certain products, and so on and so forth. So it was a continuously changing game. So all this visibility certainly helped all our operations folks be on top of it, right, and plan
All right.
for it better.
All right, Samir, let me. Sure, go ahead, Raghu. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So that was what I was talking about, was the more tactical aspect, but at a more strategic aspect, again, we collect a lot of this data at these control towers. So this is used to optimize our network design, right? And like things like improving our promise accuracy. So where we promise customers deliveries at a certain time, and how close are we to that promise, or like the demand shaping. So based on the network constraints, how we kind of are able to algorithmically shape the demand and push towards certain high performing nodes. So we are able to use all of this through these control nodes.
All right, let me bring in Samir. Samir, is that the best model to follow what Raghu has said? Considering end-to-end visibility is a major factor in creating a successful supply chain, is pairing control towers which offer insights into operations with a related digital twin which is focused on strategy, is that going to be the go-to route for retailers in being more agile when it comes to scenario planning?
I think I would go a step back and just re-say the conversation which was just happening a minute earlier, that the fundamental data pipelines have to be in place. I think what we are trying to do and what we are focusing on in Google Cloud is to focus a bit more on building the supply chain digital twins, so that you can get the real-time information and are able to take those business decisions. I think from a digital twin perspective, the focus is on gathering the data across the organization and then enhancing it by the third-party data sources that you can get. I think once you're able to have those fundamental data platforms, and you're able to collect and gather and enable and analyze the data, then you can connect it to the control towers. You can have custom applications on top of it, or you can have various ISV vendors with their applications on top of it. It doesn't really matter. That's a question of how you engage and utilize the data which has already been built up. But the focus, I would say, needs to be more on building that digital twin at this stage and having those fundamental data pipelines in place.
All right, let me get in the Accenture point of view. Manish, we've had the discussion span data and personalization, supply chain, and the platform. Keeping all of the talking points in mind, what is Accenture's point of view on the key imperatives now for retailers as they focus on post-pandemic profitable growth that is sustainable? It is something that you mentioned in the context of your earlier projects that you spoke about. But post the pandemic, how is sustainable growth going to be built? What are the imperatives going to be for retailers?
Right. I think see the conversations with most of the retailers, so most of the retailers, and I'm talking about the companies which has been there in existence for some time. They have relied largely on the stores, and that was the main thrust in terms of where most of the revenues were getting generated. And now, pandemic, the first phase and the second phase has obviously re-emphasized that the footfall on the stores will be limited, right? And we need to rely essentially on the online channels in order to get the business. And imagine a situation where most of these companies have a hole in the balance sheet because the stores, because of the lockdown, most of the time the stores were shut, and there were literally no sale, right? In terms of now, and so it's a bit of a dilemma, right? In terms of if they need to invest in all the things which I've been talking about in terms of technology, data, transforming, personalization, how would they make that change in order to make sure they're prepared for the future? And in terms of if this is if there's any other pandemic which comes in, so how are they prepared for that? So essentially, that's the conversation which we are having with our clients. With reference to what they need to do, they need to have a strategic view and also be adaptive in all the changes which is happening. And I talked about when I spoke about the changes and the experience. So the change is paramount, right? And there's a lot of discussion around data. And I mean, I take an analogy in terms of flying an airplane, right? And when you get into poor visibility, you generally rely on the information which you're getting from the navigation instrument. So imagine, I mean, in terms of there's no clear answer. In CPG and retail companies, imagine that things are changing. And once you have the data, you can make an estimate in terms of based on data that what your consumer would need, right? And you can just build a probability around it, what they want, where they want, and basically, and hopefully all that in the changing times, and hopefully that will provide that certainty. I would just add in terms of there's a lot of discussion around data absolutely within the organization, but also a lot of data which is available outside. So how we can gather our own first party data and gather the third party data which is available, and then hook a customer around it. So I think these are some of the discussions which we are having. We have to take bold steps in order to be competitive, and also in some of the conversations, some of the promoters and the CEOs, it's also about existence. It's no longer in terms of whether we need to do it now or later. It's about sustained growth from an existence perspective. And if we do that, there will be a lot of new opportunities, unlock of new growths, which could happen. And as we have seen with our panelists in terms of they've explored really the unmet needs of the consumers and explored on that.
All right, Samir, let me get in your concluding thoughts on this D2C interplay that we are talking about. Sanjeev and Raghu, they see that multi-channel approach staying on, but how do you see this D2C interplay influencing the new normal of India's retail sector?
I think this is one of the channels, and it's not really about one channel versus another channel. It is really about the ability of the platform, the shopping platform that the shopper is going to be able to provide those experiences that he or she is looking for. Whether that platform is able to provide the personalization or the simplification of the shopping experience, or give him or her the ability to be a responsible shopper or to buy local, or so all the stuff which the Asian customers are looking for. I think as long as you put the shopper in the middle of your go-to-market frameworks, you cannot go wrong. And I think you can build your experiences and the shop and the platform capabilities around it. So whether it is a D2C or it is a marketplace, you need to have those capabilities to be able to satisfy the new shopper.
Absolutely. Customer centricity. That's the name of the game. But we've run out of time. On that note, it's time to wrap up our discussion with an eye on the retail sector today as part of Forbes India and Google Cloud present the next wave of cloud innovation. As someone once said, sales go up and down, but service stays forever. So as we enter the festive season, here's wishing all the retailers on our panel the best of luck. I'd like to thank everyone for their lessons in leadership in using the power of technology. And of course, thanks to our viewers for tuning in as well. This is Gautam Srinivasan signing off.
Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable. Forbes India presents the next wave of cloud innovation in association with Google Cloud.